Did money from Minnesota taxpayers earmarked to feed hungry children wind up in the hands of a Somali terrorist group? The allegations center around a massive welfare fraud case being brought in Minnesota.
5:14 a.m., Minneapolis, Minnesota. Federal agents don't storm a cartel warehouse. They move on office buildings, residential homes, and small businesses spread across the city. Places that look ordinary, registered, compliant, legitimate on paper. And before we go further, hit like and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this, because what you're about to see is not just fraud, it's a system that was able to extract hundreds of millions of dollars while appearing completely legitimate from the outside. This wasn't a raid against criminals hiding in the shadows. It was a strike against something operating in plain sight, and that's what made it dangerous.
The magnitude of the fraud in Minnesota cannot be overstated. Staggering amounts of money that have been lost.
Federal prosecutors said they are just getting started looking into Minnesota's social services fraud schemes.
The first signal wasn't violence, it was numbers. Millions of meals reported from locations that couldn't physically produce them. Small storefronts, office spaces, even residential addresses, all claiming the same thing. Thousands of children fed every single day. Except those children didn't exist. And that's when investigators realized they weren't looking at inflated reporting, they were looking at fabrication at scale. Because this wasn't one business, it wasn't even 10. It was a network, nonprofits, food vendors, consulting groups, all connected through access to federal programs. The structure was simple: register, apply, claim, get paid, repeat. Each entity looked independent, but every one of them followed the same pattern, which meant this wasn't coincidence, it was replication. Once the system proved it worked, it didn't stop. It expanded, from food programs into housing assistance, from housing into healthcare services. Every new program became a new entry point, and every entry point used the same method. Create demand that doesn't exist, document it like it does, process it through systems built on trust, because the system verifies paperwork, not reality. And that's where the scale changed. Millions turned into hundreds of millions. Funds moved through shell companies, layered across accounts, transferred through financial networks designed to make everything appear legitimate. At every step, nothing looked wrong, because every transaction had documentation, every document had approval, and every approval followed the rules on paper. Investigators didn't break the case through a confession. They broke it through patterns, because individually every claim looked valid, every form complete, every report acceptable. But when data was aggregated, the pattern became impossible to ignore, the same numbers repeating, the same timing, the same behavior across dozens of entities. This wasn't error. It was design. And that's when the case changed, because this wasn't fraud exploiting a loophole, it was fraud exploiting trust. The entire system depended on one assumption, that participants were acting in good faith. Once that assumption failed, the system didn't break immediately, it kept working, just for the wrong purpose. What federal agents uncovered in Minnesota wasn't just a fraud case, it was a demonstration that the most effective way to exploit a system is not to attack it, but to operate inside it so perfectly that no one questions it. By the time the first wave of arrests was completed, federal investigators already knew this case wasn't ending with a handful of defendants, because what they had uncovered wasn't just fraud activity, it was a structure that had already proven it could replicate itself across programs, across entities, and across time. And once a system reaches that level, removing individuals does not remove the system, it only slows it down. Because the most important detail in this case was not how the fraud started, it was how easily it scaled. What investigators found was not coordination in the traditional sense. There was no central command issuing orders, no single leader controlling every move. Instead, there was a model, a repeatable process. One entity discovers the method, others copy it, and once it works, it spreads, like a blueprint. Because the barrier to entry was low, all it required was a registered entity, access to a program, documentation that matched requirements. That's it. No hacking, no breach, no external attack, just participation. This is where the case becomes more important than the individuals involved, because the system did exactly what it was designed to do: process claims, verify documentation, approve funding. At no point was the system built to verify reality at scale because it operates on trust, and trust is efficient, verification is expensive, so the system prioritizes efficiency, and that creates the gap. Once that gap exists, it becomes predictable. And anything predictable can be exploited because the incentives are clear: high payout, low immediate risk, minimal oversight at scale. That combination creates something dangerous because it doesn't just allow fraud, it encourages it, not intentionally, but structurally. Investigators confirmed something else. The fraud didn't stay in one lane, it expanded across multiple federal programs, food assistance, housing support, healthcare services, different systems, same method, which means the vulnerability wasn't isolated, it was systemic. And once a method works in one place, it will be tested everywhere else. The movement of money followed the same logic. Funds were not just withdrawn, they were structured, layered, transferred, reintroduced, each transaction appearing legitimate on its own, but forming a hidden network when viewed together. Because financial systems, like administrative systems, also operate on trust, and once trust is exploited, complexity becomes cover. By the time indictments were filed, the system had already been active for years, which means enforcement did not fail in response, it lagged in detection, because cases like this don't trigger immediate alarms. They build slowly, small anomalies, repeated patterns, distributed across multiple entities, invisible until aggregated. And this is the part that matters, because the risk is not one fraud scheme, the risk is the model. Because once a model exists, it does not stay contained. It spreads, adapts, reappears in different forms, different programs, different regions, but with the same logic. This case revealed something fundamental, that systems built on trust can be efficient, but they can also be vulnerable, because when trust is assumed rather than verified, it becomes an entry point. And once that entry point is discovered, it does not close on its own. Behind the financial scale, there is something else, because every dollar extracted from these programs is not abstract. It comes from systems designed to support vulnerable populations, children, families, communities in need, which means this wasn't just financial loss, it was displacement of support, resources redirected away from those they were meant to reach. Operation Silent Harvest is not just about fraud, it's about structure, because the most effective systems are not always the strongest, they are the most trusted, and trust without verification becomes the easiest path to exploitation. What this case ultimately proves is simple: the most dangerous threats don't break systems, they operate inside them, quietly, legitimately, until the system itself can no longer distinguish between real and fabricated. And once that line disappears, the damage is already done.